Hi, everybody. Um, Welcome to another episode of Composers at Home, Maybe Drinking Coffee. I'm your host, Elliot Miles McKinley. Hope everybody's doing all right tonight, wherever you happen to be watching. And I know that the country at the moment, so it's February 18th live. Your playback time may vary, but I know that we're in the grips of winter, and especially in certain parts of the nation that are not quite used to winter in the same way that, let's say, I am up here in the Boston area. So I hope if you are experiencing some severe weather, I hope that you're warm and safe. And I know it's no fun to lose power. I know a lot of people have lost power. So I hope if you've lost your power and you're watching on your phone, if you are, I hope it comes back very quickly. I'm going to, before I introduce our guest this evening, and I should say our guest is really my guest because I'm a show of one, I'm going to do the social media plug. And that is, please subscribe to the YouTube channel and like me over on Facebook, the Composers at Home Maybe Drinking Coffee page. Um, and yeah, I think uh, I I feel honored to have our guest tonight. And honored to call him my friend. Many of you who might be watching have probably seen him before. He's fairly well known in the YouTube community and the music community as a educator and as a fantastic musician. He also just happens to be an all around pretty great guy. So I think I'm going to just bring our guest in, and this is Rick Beato coming on in to us live
Hey,
from
Elliot.
from Hotlanta. Um,
Not
I
so hot tonight.
Not so hot tonight. Yeah, man, have you been? How cold has it gotten there?
We had some ice the other night and it's pretty cold tonight again. It's in the high 30s right now and raining,
Yeah,
which is not great.
right, right. I mean, you're not, of course, many people who know you, watched your videos, know that you grew up in a fairly cold part of the nation,
Yeah,
upstate,
Rochester, yep.
upstate New
So
York. So
I'm
for
used to
you,
snow.
yeah, have you made the climatological body adjustment to southern climes, or is cold still okay with you?
No, I do not like cold. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I moved to Atlanta. Honestly, I got to a point where I thought I can't go through another winter here. And Rochester all my family lives there still, and
Uh-huh.
they had pretty mild winter until about 2.5 weeks ago, and then it hasn't been above 20 degrees since then.
Right.
So,
And it's funny how that happens, with like, um, you know this in the Northeast, a warm November and December is terrifying because
right,
because it usually means Mother Nature just goes, oh, March. Let's
right,
forgot about
exactly,
March,
exactly.
right? Um, so Rick, thank you so much, man,
Pleasure.
for coming on the show and spending a little time with me and with the folks who at home who will join us hopefully. If you're at home, um, I'm monitoring the chat over on Facebook and on YouTube. Please just say hello, even if you don't have a question or a comment for Rick. Pop in, say hello, introduce yourself. Love to see who is out there watching. And Rick and I, well, we'll talk a little bit about how we met and our sort of common histories in just a little bit. Um, but we don't have a prescribed plan for you tonight. Tonight's kind of an open conversation. Rick and I will just sort of take it where we go. Rick and I both have the gift of gab, so I think we can just we could probably talk for many hours, man, and bore
No
the
problem.
audience to death. So we'll try to put a lid on it when we can. We got a couple people saying hello. David Gaines, who is a composer and a euphonium player also, and he also is a huge Northwestern fan. I know David. He's a common visitor on the show, and also Anthony Landman is also a fine composer. Popped in and said hello. He says, "Hey Rick, hey Elliot and Rick." David says, "Please allow me to say that I'm not sure who this Elliot guy is, but the Rick is the number one all-around music educator on the internet. Period. Full stop." So there you go, man. You
That
know,
sounds like a lot of pressure.
yeah. Well, um, so very briefly before we get into maybe some space about your last 4 or 5 years basically, which has been, I I think if I had talked to you in 2016, it'd be hard to have predicted. Well, I mean, COVID notwithstanding, of course, but it'd be
Yeah,
hard to
yeah, yeah,
predict kind of where you are right now, right?
yeah.
We can talk a little bit about that. I know that you've made videos about that before, and a lot of people probably have heard you tell these stories. But there are some interesting stories that resonate for me. One of them is actually your audition story, which is one that I tell students actually, because they haven't watched that. And if you haven't watched Rick's story, there's a video. What's the title of that video?
Um, Boy, it was so long ago. I
Yeah,
almost need to retell it on my channel, Elliot, because compared to how many people follow my channel, most people have not heard it. Fortunes of Hard Work, maybe
something. It had a good
something like
title.
that.
It was
Yeah,
it was something to the effect that if you try and fail, try again, kind of thing.
yeah,
And that was a bit of the, I guess the motto of the story. We can sort of make a sort of encapsulated uh, explain talk of that, because it inspires me too, and I've had my own failures as well and successes. Um, but before that, how might you say, David Gaines, who does not know who this Elliot guy is, how is it that this Elliot guy knows the Rick guy? It's interesting. Rick and I uh, didn't cross paths directly until it was mid 2016 or so. Maybe late fall of 2016 when I emailed you. Or no,
mhm.
I made a comment on one of your
You made a
videos.
comment, yeah,
Yeah, and you
and I
commented
said,
back.
"Are you?" I think maybe I said, "Is Tom your father? Was Tom your
With Tom
father?"
McKinley, your father.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and that's how that got started. So Rick, as again, some of you may know, watched his channel before. Rick went to New England Conservatory of Music for his master's in the mid '80s,
yep,
and my father taught at New England for about 25 years, almost 73 to 80 to 94, something like that. And so my dad was around in in the ether, as it were,
yes, he was.
with teaching jazz piano and composition at the same time, maintaining both careers at a very high level. And so Rick knew of my pop, and at that time I was in high school, so I wasn't quite. I didn't attend NEC until you had already just gotten your job, I think, at Ithaca in 80
Yeah,
87.
'87.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. That's when I started NEC actually. Um, but then, so later, when I made a comment on one of Rick's videos, because I had started showing Rick's videos, um, Rick started making. It actually wasn't Dylan. A lot of people find their way to you through Dylan with the
Mhm.
viral video of. And if you don't know who Dylan is Rick's son, and I've met Dylan. He's a very intelligent, precocious, gentle young man who happens to have a gift of perfect pitch. And there's these videos of Dylan, identifying crazy chords and notes and everything like this, and one of those got viral. Um, but I hadn't watched that. I watched one of your ear training videos, one of your first ones, and I think I made some comment, or I forget what it was. Maybe it was about jazz. And then Rick said, "Are you Tom McKinley's son, perhaps chance?" And then we started a conversation, and um, turns out that your dear friend Iden is was also very inspired by my pop at the time. They used to play
Yep.
together and stuff like this, and so we started this conversation, and we started a friendship basically at this stage in our lives. And I had the great pleasure, of course, of having you in Alba at the composition program in 2019. And so that's how we got to know each other, and then we bug each other every now and then on Messenger or whatever from time to time, and sometimes I drop in on your live streams. And almost,
Yep.
I don't know if you've noticed this, but every single time, and I'm going to say this now, every live stream, I make a point of saying, when is your Freddie Hubbard video coming out? I don't know if you noticed, but I'll always throw that out there. I'll say I'm waiting for.
I need a Freddie Hubbard video. He is way underrepresented, I think, just in general
Mhm.
in jazz, and I need to do my part to change, at least from my end,
Well,
change that.
I'll keep reminding you, man. I'll
Yes.
keep reminding you. Um, so, and I happen to also love Freddie. I mean, so those at home who don't know who Freddie Hubbard is, Freddie Hubbard was one of the great jazz trumpet players, but also one of the great tune writers. He wrote
Yes.
some classics, like the like
Standards.
standards, man.
Yeah.
Just standard jazz tunes, beautiful tunes. A lot of people know more of Wayne Shorter's tunes, like right off the bat, but Freddie, man, he wrote some just incredible tunes. Bridget is such a beautiful tune, that ballad. Of course, there's Red Clay, and I mean, there's so many tunes. Anyway, that's another story. I love Freddie, so I'm looking forward to how you what makes Freddie great.
I just did a video with Winton or on Winton. Actually, Winton playing "Happy Birthday."
Yeah, I saw that video.
Yeah,
You said it was the
and
world, like you had a title like the world's greatest video or something like
greatest
that.
video on YouTube.
Right, right.
And
Um,
the improvisation, it's a perfect video to introduce people to improvising, I think.
yeah, yeah,
And because you know the tune, and when you can hear him play it over, and just it just makes you in a great mood. So I always put that on anytime I'm in a bad mood, and instantly I'm taken somewhere else. But
yeah, yeah.
but that's my first of the great trumpet player videos there.
Nice. The first of what I hope to be many.
Yes, I made a Miles video
Yeah, you
too.
did. You
I
did.
did, yeah, on
Yes, you
Oleo.
yes you
Yep.
did. Yes, you did.
So I'll
Um,
eventually get through them.
yeah, yeah. I'm curious. Well, actually, let's backtrack a little bit for the folks. We're getting some comments here. Oh, Michael DeQuattro. Nice to thank you for dropping in, watching. Michael is a percussionist, and he's one of the teachers at my school, and he was really excited when he found out that
Cool.
you were going to be on the show. Um, Tony Landman says, "I love that video where Rick goes to the music store in Alba."
It was so fun.
Yeah, what was it labeled? It was the world's biggest music store or something like that.
Yes. It was honestly it's biggest music store I've ever seen, Elliot. And people were telling me about it, and I was saying, yeah, I don't believe this. Yeah, the guy's like, oh no, it's the biggest music store you ever saw. The guy's at the desk at the hotel and everything. And I was
Yeah,
like, okay, I'm gonna rent a car and go there. And and it was the biggest music store
right,
I'd seen. They
right.
were right. And never seen that much gear anywhere. It was massive. It was really like five huge stores. It was great.
Kind of like,
It
yeah,
was so fun.
yeah,
That was one of my most fun videos, that adventure.
yeah. That was a lot of fun. And some of my students, like they were just so thrilled to like just be just in the car and just like being like part of the experience. I remember that. Um, so I'm gonna ask a question like what you've answered you've talked about this before, but I mean for those who might be less oriented to your foray into YouTube education. You've been an educator for many years. I mean, this is like you're a veteran teacher, going way back. Not just I mean, so you bringing your talents as a teacher to this wide platform, this open platform, is really special. And uh, what was, do you remember what was your impetus for, I think, starting to make videos? I know that you were prodded by someone to say, "Hey, Rick, you really should make some videos." And I think you tell the story in a funny way, but you say nobody wants to see an old white-haired dude on YouTube, right?
That's
That was
exactly.
oh,
Yeah,
how
well,
wrong you were.
I know. Well, yeah, I guess, yeah, I was wrong about that. I started actually on Facebook after the viral video, the Dylan,
Hmm.
phenomenon, and which was at the end of 2015, and so I started going on and doing live streams, very much like my YouTube videos, and I would play music in them, and I'd probably go on twice a week or so. And then eventually around April or so of 2016, Facebook started taking down videos that had,
Right.
it was like
Mm.
a content ID things, but they
Sure.
would block the videos. I
Hmm.
didn't know what it was. I just knew that you couldn't use music anymore.
Hmm.
So that's when I got my intern Rhett, um, kind of prodded me to try YouTube. So I did it, and it was easy to do the Facebook videos because you just have to deal with the stream. You press a button, you use your phone.
Hmm.
I mean, this is your setup is very complex compared to if you're just streaming on your phone.
Right.
But uh, so I started. You have to you have to use a camera and to make videos, and then you have to learn the editing
There's a
software.
lot
And
of steps. Yeah. Right.
yeah, there's a lot of steps that it takes to do it.
Hmm.
And so my intern Rhett convinced me about it. Now Rhett Shull. He has a channel with over 300,000 subscribers now
Right.
too. He taught me how to use a camera, and I started making videos. Like the first video was June 8th of 2016, and I did I don't know, over 300 videos in the first year, I think, something
Hmm.
like that.
Hmm.
And I just kept jumping from topic to topic.
Right. Right. Did you notice, um I don't remember when I started watching, it was fairly, your channel was fairly in its infancy.
Yeah.
Um I remember very clearly when you hit the 100,000 mark, that day. Actually, I think I watched your video about that,
Yep.
um I don't, I think you might have had 20 or 30,000 subscribers when I subscribed, actually, when I clicked subscribe.
Yeah.
Um and it's interesting. When did you think that this was actually, like, could be a thing? Like, like, was there a point where you, like, even with like as 50,000 subscribers, you thought this isn't going to last? Like, I don't know how long this is going to go. Like, or did you realize at a certain point that, hey, if I just keep creating content and the content is quality content, people will keep coming back to watch?
Well, I was talking to a buddy of mine last night who has a YouTube channel, and
Mm-hmm.
he's kind of stuck at about 1,000 subscribers. He's made about 50 videos, and they're very good videos. His name's
Mm-hmm.
Bobby Huff,
Mm-hmm.
and each of his videos has about 900 or 1,000 views or so, and but some have a little bit more. And I told him, I said, I didn't hit 1,000 views on a video until I had made about 40 or so. None
Yeah.
of them had 1,000, even
Yeah.
with I because Dylan's the any of the viral videos with Dylan, and it was a few viral videos we had, but they were all on Facebook, so and nothing translated over to YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
So um, I'd get subscribers, but they didn't really translate into big videos, and
Like,
people make
yeah.
comments like, "Well, your
Yeah.
content's great. Why doesn't anybody watch your channel?"
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so then once you hit 10,000, that's kind of a marker. They always say that the first 10,000 is the hardest. And there's some
Mm-hmm.
real truth to that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Once I passed 10,000, it started to pick up. And then once I hit 25,000 or so, 30,000, then I knew that
That there
it
was
could go
something there.
somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if that's part of, that's the way YouTube prioritizes algorithms. And like it's almost like you got to prove yourself to get to that 10,000, and then the suggested videos, or like the videos that pop up, that people would watch next. You start getting more higher priority in that. So, uh, well, first of all, I mean, regardless of how many subscribers one may have to a channel, I mean, I think content is important, right? That's,
Content's everything.
you have to have something that people want to watch, no
Yeah.
matter what the subject is, right? Um, and so, uh, did you have um, early on a vision for where you wanted to take the channel, or was it more like I just want to talk about these things and I like kind of week to week? I mean, did you have a long-term plan for the channel early?
Well, when I started the channel, it was going to be a channel for professional musicians. And I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
talk about things that pros might not have experienced, or people that are professional in one area might
Mm-hmm.
want knowledge but can't go back to school. And I knew things about harmony that they don't really teach in at that they didn't really teach in any of the colleges
Yeah.
that I knew of at the time. And
Mm-hmm.
um, so all my initial videos were, a lot of talking about advanced music theory,
Mm-hmm.
improvisation, film scoring.
Oh, right. That's right. You had a
Yeah,
bunch
I
of
did a
film
lot of film
score.
scoring
Yes.
videos, and
Yes.
I would break down film cues, all the many big composers,
Mm-hmm.
and so um, I did made videos on all the modes. I made videos, and I would always compose a piece for the
One of the
videos, and
modes, right? Yeah.
yeah, so that was kind of um, the where I started. And I also did some music production things, but
Mm-hmm.
they were related to mixing and some engineering
Mm-hmm.
things. But that didn't really ever work on my channel. It's funny, I eventually, 2 years into my channel, I started this What Makes a Song Great series, and my
Yep.
channel really exploded. I mean, I still was at about 200,000 subscribers. It wasn't like my channel was doing poorly then,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but that's what's things like that have allowed it to really,
Really blossom,
yeah.
right? It went beyond the kind of the theory nerd side of things and went into things where the average sort of listener to, say, a band that you might have talked about goes, "Oh, wow, this is really cool. I didn't know that." Even if you talked about a theoretical aspect or something like this, you always brought it in. In all of the videos that I've watched in that series, you talk to everybody. I mean, you
Mhm.
have a little bit for everybody. So there's a little bit for those who might know, Mixolydian flat six or something like this, but
Right.
also, you're also not just talking over the heads of those who are like, I have no idea what that is, and I don't want to know what that is. Right? So, um,
Even if you don't know what it want to know what it is, I'm going to
you
explain
could
it to you.
explain it
That's
and in a way and demonstrate it,
yeah.
right? Demonstrate
But
this.
but I want to say that all along the way, starting very early, I always had videos, biographical videos,
Mm-hmm.
like the one that you were talking about me not getting into college for music.
Right.
And I told I've told not my entire life story, but I've told a lot of stories um, about my a lot of personal stories on my channel that have
Mm-hmm.
done very well,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah.
And I think that that's one of the things. Being a storyteller
Mm.
is very important for being successful on YouTube.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. And this is, and I mean this sincerely. The thing that I think makes what makes Rick's videos great. Maybe I should do a video on what makes Rick's videos great. It's actually an interesting kind of like meta deconstruction.
Right.
Um, but is that you you have a way of explaining things that is not um, that doesn't feel like it goes over anybody's head, first of all, and the second way is that you explain it in a very positive, and you said storytelling way. Like you always find a story somewhere in there to tell. And and I think that's what also lends a lot of that authenticity. People know that you're not just making stuff up, right? That you're and that you're not going to just say stuff that you don't know. That you're gonna, you're gonna talk about things that you genuinely know, and you're also, I think another thing that makes a lot of your content uh, good and makes, I think, you as a personality good is that people also know that the they're not going to get the answer that everyone wants to hear. They're going to get your opinion.
Yeah.
And well, we all know that, not everybody has shares your opinion. And when we talk about, like, on Rick has the other channel, his live channel, and when he does go on, and that's more informal channel, and I was one of the very first subscribers to that
Right.
Rick Beato live channel, and what is it called, the ban hammer,
That's right.
the ban hammer, right? It
I
would
had
be
to
like,
train people on there.
yeah. So, but I think that's I think people like that. I think people who even disagree with you, I think, like the fact that you're going to tell them the truth from your point of view, and they might
Yeah.
disagree with it, right?
Yeah.
You're not just there to
Great.
say the 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 correct thing to say, or whatever however that might translate. Um, so someone just asked, what does make a song great? That's Skinny Richie. That's man, that's a real huge question. Maybe we'll tackle that one in a little bit. But thanks for asking the question. Incidentally, um, if you have questions for Rick, feel free to type them in the chat, or just want to make comments to anything we're talking about. Feel free to say it. I'll again, I keep checking the comments as they roll through. Um, oh, Michael asks, I'm wondering if Rick has any favorite videos of his own, that is.
Um, One of the ones one that I did recently, that I did a few months ago, where I recreated the solo section to Stairway to Heaven. And these are all things that I, from my youth, right,
Mm-hmm.
that I never realized I'd be able to do to so I recreated the solo section of Stairway to Heaven, then imagined that I was Peter Frampton playing over, and I had my friend Phil X pretend he was Eddie Van Halen, and Eddie Van Halen passed away the day after I released the video. And then I
Right.
had the great Eric Johnson
Yeah.
play on it. I asked
Yeah.
him, I called him up, Eric, hey, I'm doing this video and I want you to be in it. And well, what is it, Rick? Well, I want you to solo over Stairway to Heaven. I'm like, what? Yeah, yeah, it's a video. It's a reimagining of someone else other than Jimmy Page who played over Stairway to Heaven. So that was a fun video to make.
Mm-hmm.
And I have I have definitely have some favorite videos, but I'm always trying to improve some of the videos that I did early in my channel that I thought were really good videos. I know I could make a lot better versions of those videos now. I just my production value is so much better than it was back then,
Right.
and that's
Yeah. Right.
and
Right.
and I notice that when I go back and watch those old videos. That's
Mm-hmm.
the thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's you know, unless one has a lot of orientation to production values, that's something you learn over time, right?
That's right.
You learn how to get better. You get better tools. You get better lights, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
Um, uh, I well, Mal Merrick, one of my former students from the University of Tennessee, popped on. He's a composer and a guitar player, and is a subscriber to one of your channels. He has a fairly long question, I guess.
Okay.
He says, I have a question I would like to ask. On your videos, it's often discussed how a lot of pop has gotten standardized, as far as chord progressions like 1, 5, 6, 4, etc. I find this interesting because I kept thinking that maybe pop music was going to experience what happened with rock in the 90s, where I believe grunge music's exploration of mediant chord relationships is part of what turned people's ears, I guess, probably on. Yet lately, I wonder if a lot of the pop producers avoid those chords not because of their imagination, not because their imagination doesn't go there, but because the audience doesn't want to hear it. I,
That's
he just finishes. I do
yeah,
like
yeah.
their exploration of sound and texture. Do you think the current state of chord progressions in pop is more due to the audience versus the writers?
That's a great question. That's something I think about all the time. Up until so I've done a couple videos in the past. I've done 3 videos where I listened to the top 10 of the pop charts. I've done 2, and then I just did one a couple days ago on the top 10 of the rock charts now. And these are things that I just check in on every couple months, but I
Sure,
make a video on it.
sure.
And
I
you,
want to I
you
want to quickly pause by saying thank you for doing that because that also keeps me current. Because I'm like, oh, Rick just did a thing on the top 10. I want to hear what's going on and hear,
yeah,
and I like hearing
I do
your
that so
ears.
that
Like,
you don't have to,
thank
right?
you. You
Yes, you're
bless you
welcome.
for doing the service for me.
So the I mean, in the top, it's interesting in the on the rock charts, the second um song number 2 had the guitarist and drummer from Soundgarden playing, and they had this great riff that was in 7. And you rarely hear things
Right.
on any chart that are in odd times anymore, which used to be common back in the 60s.
Oh yeah.
Beatles wrote a lot, tons of people wrote
Yeah.
in 7,
Yeah.
very common.
Yeah.
And then the idea of any type of mediant chord relationships, like the Weezer song. There's a Weezer song. It was number 10, and it starts E and then goes up to A flat major, and then but it's really a secondary dominant because then it goes to C sharp
Because it goes
minor.
there. Okay. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So and that's pretty much like a major 3. That's there's almost no modulations. There's no exploration of any chromaticism. Kurt Cobain would use all these crazy
Yes.
odd,
Yes, he would.
and so would Chris Cornell, Soundgarden. They would do things in odd times with a lot of chromatic harmony and
Mm-hmm.
really
Mm-hmm.
sophisticated stuff. Honestly,
Yeah.
all the grunge bands
Yeah.
used a lot of chromaticism,
Right.
and that's just disappeared from music. Although it was in new metal that happened in some, but I think a lot of the stuff it's a combination of that they don't know that the people that are writing these things now they don't even know what those chords are. They don't
Yeah.
even experiment
Yeah.
to try and find them.
Right. Right. Right.
So
I'm curious about that because I was going to actually ask you a question, and it's related partially to my own teaching because I get students that show up um, in my office every beginning of every year. I want to be a music major. I'm like, okay, great. So what do you want to do? Like, what's your? I mean, it's it's kind of a strange thing to be a music major. What do you want to do? What is your experience? I have a laptop and I have FL Studio, right? That's the first thing. I said, okay, cool, great. And I'm thinking in my head, so do 5 million other kids in their bedrooms, right? Okay.
yeah,
So what do you want to do with a music degree? I want to be a producer. And like I try so hard not to laugh every time I hear
yeah,
that. Because I mean, first of all, it is true that the definition of producer from like, say, George Martin's time to now has changed in terms of like what people think of as a producer, right? The term itself. But also, for me, the first thing I say to those kids is, okay, well, if you really want to do it and you want to be better than, the rest, you really got to know music and you got to know a lot of music. And you have to know a lot of music that might be well outside of what you normally will be working in so that you can draw on the full panoply of resources. Um, and that's what the best producers, truly the great producers,
yeah.
have.
Quincy
I mean,
Jones, yeah,
very often these cats are very heavily they're either jazz musicians, heavily trained jazz musicians, or classical composers
Yeah.
that just kind of got into the act of producing, and that became a gig for them, and they enjoy it and they're good at it. And I was and to just today, of course, you remember our friend Pete Farmer.
Yep.
Yeah. And Pete was just here today at the house. Pete's giving my fiance's son Chen Ping is learning how to play clarinet. So Pete comes over once a week. I feed him cookies and coffee, and he gives Chen Ping a lesson. And a singer-songwriter friend of mine contacted me a few days ago, and he sent me a rough mix of a tune that he wrote. And he's got a producer in Nashville that he's working with. He wants to do this album, but he knows I'm a composer. He's known me for years. He says, "I want your ears on this," because he just wanted to get a different point of view, because
Yeah.
he's a very good at what he does, but he also understands that he wants to bring in some other ears. And I said, "Sure, man, send it along." And I listened to it yesterday, and then I thought, you know what? I'm going to have Pete blow over this. So I just hooked up my SM58 and like put it on a stack of books. Pete had his tenor. And just an hour before he came on, I had him record two takes through. He played. I laid down some string pads and did a couple of like interesting things back there behind what he sent.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking to myself, like, for me, it wasn't hard for me to imagine what could make that track pop. Now, I'm not saying that what I did is great, like in terms of like I'm the world's greatest producer or whatever, but I think my experience as a classical composer and knowing a lot of music, even with the song, it's fairly straightforward, sort of folk rock ballad.
Mm-hmm.
It's beautiful. He's a good lyricist, very good voice. It's fairly well produced. It's already fairly well mixed. So I wasn't going to touch any of that. But I was sort of wondering your impressions of like this kind of ties back to Merrick and also to this idea of chord progressions is that I'm able to do this pretty quickly because my experience can my ears can do that. I actually did a mixed Lydian flat 6 at the end of that piece, which is in D major. I just put in a nice little string chord on the end, just that give that little yearning sound that does.
Yeah.
I didn't fuck any, pardon my French, I didn't mess any of the chord progressions up, right? I didn't change anything. So I'm wondering, like, is it because producers don't have that big set of ears, as opposed to the audience, in Merrick's kind of query about the audience versus producers? Are the producers afraid to go there, the ones that know that? I'm interested too in that.
Well, the days of George Martins that are, excellent composers and arrangers that can arrange orchestral music, and Quincy Jones that are,
Right,
these are real pros,
right,
incredible musicians. They all have music degrees and they're composers themselves. Those days are long, long gone. I mean, most of the people, when I asked Steve Lukather, why are there no guitar solos? He says, because people can't play them. So that's why they
right, right.
that's why they
Okay.
stopped having guitar solos in songs. It's kind of the
Yeah,
if people don't know the where these other chords are, or they don't want to even experiment to try and, I mean, the producers, we come from a background of having music, going to music school,
yeah,
having studying music as kids, and having a deep background, and typically that's what producers back in the historically were excellent professional musicians
right,
and arrangers and
right,
composers. So
right. Yeah,
it's just not the case anymore.
yeah, yeah. I wonder, do you suppose that's one reason why Joni Mitchell, who's fantastic, hired and got people like Herbie and Jocko to play with her, because she wanted to elevate her already really great songs in some way that jazz musicians could come in and do some stuff that she knew that they could do.
Yes, and they were the only ones that could figure out the chord progressions that because she had
Well,
all
talk
these.
about also interesting chord progressions. I mean, Joni didn't
Yeah,
need any help when it came to cool chord progressions,
yeah, and all the
right?
alternate tuning she used. she was just had a great ear. She knew who all the great players were and surrounded herself with them. And they were huge fans. Wayne
Yeah,
and
yeah, right. They
Herbie
were
and
definitely, yeah.
Matheny, Jocko. They were all huge fans of hers.
Hmm.
Larry Carlton. She had all the
She
best
had
session
every
players. She had,
Lyle Mays played with her, right?
yeah, Lyle
Yeah,
Mays.
yeah,
Yeah. Mike Brecker
yep,
toured with her, played on Shadows and
yeah.
Light, the live album. I mean,
I
she
mean,
had,
she had a veritable who's who of like whoever was headlining at Newport Jazz Festival was with
yeah,
her in her band,
yeah.
you know, at one time or another.
I mean, she's a absolute genius. She is one of the most brilliant songwriters, lyricists, melody writers, and she had. I use this term aesthetic aptitude.
Mm,
I use that for people that are older that know what's hip just instinctually.
yeah.
They just have this aesthetic. They know what is cool that for young kids will even think is cool. There was a mixer named Andy Wallace that mixed all these big. He mixed Nirvana, Nevermind, but he mixed all the big heavy rock records of the 90s and the 2000s, including he produced Jeff Buckley's record Grace, which is a fantastic record.
Mm,
But Andy was in his 60s and then in his 70s and working with Linkin Park and Rage
yeah,
Against the
yeah,
Machine. I mean, like everything.
yeah.
And he's a guy, bald guy with a white beard. And when people would meet him, the bands, wait, you're Andy Wallace? He looks like somebody's
Hmm.
grandfather. And he knew what was cool. He knew he would mix in DJ scratching and all this stuff. He knew what level to
Hmm.
put it at. He created the
Hmm.
sounds really.
Yeah, yeah,
And I think that some people just have that. It doesn't matter how old they are, they just have great taste.
yeah,
And I mean,
yeah.
that's ultimately what it's about.
Yeah, right. It is. I mean, I think it's not even a question of what what the genre is. It's a question of what's going to work and where can you make it pop? Like I used the word pop twice tonight, but I mean, you know what I mean? Like where it's like the difference between food that has no salt in it, or put a little bit of salt to bring out a flavor, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes, food needs a little salt to bring out some flavor or whatever the case may be. We got a couple of questions
Okay.
that have come in. Let's see. Tony Landman asks, has Rick heard any updates or responses from? Oh, this has to do with the congressional committee that you.
They're having another hearing on I believe March 5th, so in a few weeks. So this is an ongoing thing, but I submitted some answers. They wanted me to give some further they had some further questions for me
Mm-hmm,
back in November. So I submitted another um, another
what do they
few
call it?
paragraphs
Yeah.
of ideas. I answered the questions,
Right.
and so that's moving along actually. So we'll see what happens.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
These things take a while.
Yeah. Yeah. There. It works at the speed of life. So, right.
Yeah.
Um, David asks, Rick, this is an interesting question. Who are your favorite modern classical composers that aren't dead yet? That's a tough
Uh,
question.
um, well, Elliot,
Thank you, man.
yes. Um,
Pete Farmer.
Pete Farmer. Oh man, Pete. He sent me a piece recently. He's here talking about aesthetic aptitude. Pete is writes very melodic, sophisticated music, and
Yes, he does.
he's he's not a kid.
No.
Um, and honestly, when I met Pete, I had this preconceived idea as to what his music would be like, and it was nothing like that. I mean, it
Right.
blew me away.
You said,
Uh,
I remember you told me, actually, you said it in one of your live streams too. You said because your room was like one or next door or two,
Next door to him, and
and
he would be
he was
practicing
shedding.
standards. Yeah,
Yeah,
woodshedding and
and
standards.
so you thought it was just going to be like a bunch of two fives,
That's right.
right? And you're just sitting there, you're thinking, oh my God, this not
Yeah,
two
when
fives.
at the concert, I was just
Yeah,
I my jaw was on the floor. I couldn't believe it. It was beautiful, modern classical. Just It
Yeah.
was I mean, it really was blown away by Pete. So that was actually a really great that concert was fantastic. I really enjoyed that. That was one of the highlights of the trip.
Yeah, that was fun. Um, I don't know if I mean you do have you know um, occasionally you'll highlight some composers. I mean Iden,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah,
I mean
I
he's an improviser, but he's also a composer. I mean his compositions are, most of those are like improvisations, frozen improvisations, if you will. But
yeah.
yeah.
Um I want to highlight some more um modern classical composers. The things that I've done the most probably are talking about film composers,
Hmm.
you know, contemporary film composers. It's tough to YouTube doesn't um if you try to make videos about things that are more esoteric,
Hmm.
you have to find a way to have some type of a hook in them,
Yeah.
that they have to have a story surrounding them or
Right.
something.
Right.
So that is always the challenge. And I've and YouTube, they punish you for I don't mean that in a bad way, but for
Mm.
deviating from you, you know from what you do. Now in my channel, I've done so many different I've done a lot of modern classical, talked about
Hmm.
modern classical music and
Hmm.
composing.
Hmm.
But they really like it when I make videos that get 1 million views. Now
Right.
that really has no bearing on what I make, because I make
Hmm.
plenty of videos that,
Hmm.
you know, I made a video on Jimmy Cobb when he passed away, great
Yes.
jazz drummer,
Yep.
because I didn't think anybody was going to make a video on Jimmy Cobb. So I thought, okay, well, I'll make a video on Jimmy Cobb. He needs to
He needs to
he
have
needs to
video.
be,
Right. Needs to
yeah,
be right.
I need to do this.
Right.
So um I many times will do things that are not popular, but
Hmm.
uh, in order to kind of reach the most people, you have to figure out some type of hook,
Hmm.
some story. If it's a story about a
Yeah.
you know, classical composer, a modern classical composer, there, you know, that would draw people in to listen to a piece,
Right.
that would be the way to do it.
Yeah.
I still haven't figured that out yet, Elliot. I'm
Yeah.
working on that.
Um, it's interesting because it kind of ties back to what we said at the top of the show about this. You are a good storyteller, and so if there is a story to tell, you would tell it well. Um, and I think it like you said, whatever YouTube's it's all bots and algorithms and computers that are usually doing all these kinds of decision making in terms of video placement. I know that you and I have talked about this like kind of informally, like you've talked to me, but this was now 2 years ago, about kind of how YouTube's analytics work, and like what you knew right then, you knew years ago when what videos would do, what you could predict what video was going to do well
Yeah.
and what video wasn't, and you almost could predict to the nearest thousand how many, before you publish a video, how many viewers it was likely to get. Like you had that
Yeah.
pretty much down, and it was almost like you'd say, "Oh, I knew that would get X number," and you'd point to the thing, and it would be that number, and you'd say, "That's I know that was going to get that."
Yeah. I've talked to other YouTubers about this as well. Adam Neely, who's a very dear friend of mine. I
Mm-hmm.
asked Adam this a long time ago. I've made a number of videos with Adam, and I said, Adam, do you know how well your videos are going to do? He said, oh yeah, absolutely. I know the ones that are going to do well and ones that are not, that are going to. And it's not that they don't do, there's certain topics that there's just not as high a level of interest in.
Right.
And you know, I did a video about drum recording and drum miking,
I
and
was just thinking about that because when you mentioned about your production videos, I
yeah.
was literally thinking about that because I remember, you know, you about the miking and stuff. I remember that video. It was funny you mentioned that. Anyway,
Yeah, so I made a video that of things. I always make videos of what I think is interesting. So I
right,
made a video
right.
on single miking toms and the snare drum and the bass drum, all the drums, and double miking them,
Mm-hmm.
and how you get them in phase, and for people to hear the sound. And the video did really badly. And I remember calling my younger brother John. I said, John, I thought that was a great video, and nobody's interested. He said, who uses a drum set anymore? Everybody just use drum programs. I said,
Well, there's that.
I was like, ah. And you know what? The thing is that I had done a video on Steve Gadd's drum fills
Yes,
on Asia that was a huge
yes,
video.
yes,
On John Bonham, I talked
yeah.
about miking, when the levee breaks and the drum sound to that. That was a
Mm-hmm.
production video, which did incredibly well. Well, because they had stories around them. That's why.
Right, right. There's some the surrounding of that has a hook, like you said, there's a hook.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
not just Rick showing in his studio, well, if you hang the mic this many inches off the drum and then you do, you know, right? It's a different
Yeah.
thing, right?
But I made
Um,
a video today where that I'm comparing three different types of pickups on three different Les Pauls.
mhm.
And and these are videos that I make for myself because I want to hear the difference.
You're right, right.
Even though I know, I just want to me it's kind of, immortalizing it, I guess, in a
Yeah,
video,
yeah,
and these experiments. And
yeah,
that to me is one of the most fun things about my channel, is that I get to do things like that. So,
yeah, yeah. I think that's probably also, I mean, it's one of the incentives to making videos if one is so inclined to do so, is making videos about stuff that you really find interesting.
yeah.
Um, and it's like all of your what makes this song great videos. I mean, like, you know, you cover a whole wide gambit of styles, and different periods and so forth. Um, and you are truly jazzed about all of that music.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what it is. When you're talking about it, it's like, wow, this is so awesome. Hear this, right? And that's really infectious because you really like you really think those songs are great,
Yeah, and I'm
you
I'm
know?
such a fan of great songwriting, great lyric writing, great sounds and production. I mean, there's so many things.
Mm,
Some songs
mm,
I love because of the production alone.
mm-hmm.
And me being a producer, I think I look at music, I know how difficult it is to make a great sounding record.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what genre of music is. I once I learned how to mic pianos, and I did many records where I mic'd pianos, and I mic'd them so many different ways because
Mm-hmm.
different studios I'd work in would have
Would
different
one thing,
microphones, and
right,
you'd experiment and
right.
see, okay, well, those don't sound good, and that mic placement because the rooms are different, the piano's different.
Mm-hmm.
Then I started listening to a lot of, I'd put on Beethoven's Fourth Piano Concerto, and I'd say, oh man, listen to the miking in that piano, that's so bad. And
Right.
when I recognize, if I heard, Christian Zimmerman playing with Bernstein conducting, which he actually did all of the Beethoven piano concertos, all five, and Bernstein conducted three of them. Christian Zimmerman did the first and second one. He conducted for the piano,
Mm-hmm.
but the recordings on these are phenomenal.
Yeah.
And they were done in, I think, 1985 or so, and it's like, wow, that's how you mic a piano. That's how you record an orchestra. This was
Like
really,
this is
really
it.
a
Yeah.
great. And then, yeah, I'll hear contemporary recordings of it, long, long, and that, things where the piano is, the mid range of the piano is inaudible, so you can't really hear the lines
Right.
distinctly.
Right.
And so
Right.
that's a thing that, as a producer with my producer ear, I
Mm-hmm.
become very sensitive to those things.
Mm-hmm. You know, I like you am a lover of things that sound interesting and good, and it doesn't like the music is important to me too. I think with music brain, but I also think with the sound brain.
Yeah.
Um, and boy, I've had those experiences where there are these commercial recordings that are released, classical music or jazz or whatever, and you think, wow, like what was the engineer thinking? Like,
Right.
wow, like why does this sound like crap? It's like it's not that you didn't have access to good equipment. Like I'm, I guess but like you said, it's a very hard thing to do. Maybe in the moment, it was. I don't know. I mean, but it's funny how things can get released. They can go through that whole process of mastering and listening, but the artists and so forth, and then come out and you know sound just dead,
Yeah.
or whatever, or badly mixed. There's a recording of no, I love Esa-Pekka Salonen and I love the Philharmonia Orchestra, but there's a recording of The Rite is Spring that I got years ago, um, that I don't like because it's so close mic'd.
Mhm.
It changes the nature of the piece, no matter how good the interpretation is.
Well, it would you would never have anything. The composer would never imagine their music
No,
sounding like that. I don't think. I
no,
mean,
because
obviously,
it's in an orchestra, especially that kind
yeah,
of size orchestra, it's meant to blend.
yeah.
It's meant to.
I now there's certain pieces where like music for strings, percussion, and celeste Bartok that the opening when they're playing with their mutes on is so quiet.
Mm,
And
mm,
on every
yeah,
recording, I'm always thinking to myself, I always have to turn that up and then I have to
I
turn it
know,
down.
because it's
And I
like it
think,
gets loud, right?
okay,
Yeah,
can't they use a compressor or something at the beginning of this? Like
yeah,
I always want to find my favorite recordings and just cut it
just
and
remix it.
raise the level
Yeah,
up in the
right,
front half, you
right,
know. It's
right.
that's one of the
I
things. There's so much dynamic range on some of these classical recordings
Yeah.
that the pianissimo sections get complete, can get completely lost.
It's interesting you bring that up. We have a couple more questions that came in, but this is a fascinating topic because I literally have had the same exact experience as you. Yeah, I mean, it's funny. It's like you're me. Like, but when you listen to it live, it doesn't have that feeling
That's
at
right.
all. And this is one of the real. I mean, recording pop and rock music is hard enough because of the expectations and all this kind of stuff, and the instruments and the layering, and trying to get a good drum sound, for example. Um, and that very well, having worked a lot in that world as a producer.
Mhm.
In the classical music world, in my limited time as a recording producer, and working aside really great engineers, and I've had the privilege. I've worked at Abbey Road with the London Symphony, and stuff like that. I mean, that was the high point of my recording
Doesn't get
producer
any higher than
days.
that.
No, it doesn't. And those engineers know what they're doing in
That's
that
right.
big sound studio. But classical music is a funny thing to record because of the dynamic range, and because what it sounds like in a live performance in a hall like how to get that feeling, like how to get that without destroying the music somehow. I don't know that I have an answer for that, but it's a challenge, you
Well,
know.
I have a good friend, Alan Meyerson, that records a lot of film scores. He
Mm,
does
mm,
Hans Zimmer, James Newton Howard, a lot of big film composers, and they'll do a orchestral date where they'll have 250 channels on an SSL going with mics. So everything's close mic'd.
yeah.
Everything there are multiple
Mm-hmm.
arrays going on.
Mm-hmm.
All anything you can imagine. He sent me photos of some of the sessions, and they have the best equipment with the
Mm-hmm.
biggest budgets.
Mm-hmm.
And they need to give the composers and the directors as much flexibility as they want. But
Right.
and these people are he's a real expert in recording
Mm-hmm.
orchestral music because he
Mm-hmm.
does it so often,
Mm-hmm.
and they have everything that they would want it they would
To
need.
do, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, right. Everything in their toolbox.
yeah, and
Right.
there's some fantastic uh you know really well recorded film music out there
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean a lot of the best engineers, because that's where the work is,
Right.
go, and and they know how to record
Right.
orchestras
Right. And game and video game music too.
and video game music.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep.
I want to get to the couple questions. I just want to make one sort of additional comment to this, is that one of the things I see as on the sort of the other side of the table as a composer and teaching younger composers who grow up on recordings. They grow up
Mhm.
on listening to video game and film music recordings, and they think that that's what an orchestra sounds like. Like that's they have an expectation that if they write something, it's going to sound like that. Not just because it's going to sound good, but also in terms of like the balancing and the miking. And then they're heavily disappointed
Oh
when
yeah.
they get to the concert hall and it doesn't sound anything like,
Well, one of the
or their
things.
finale or Sibelius plays it back for them, right? Yeah. So that's a challenge, right? It's like, well, hey, it doesn't, strings at pianissimo aren't gonna, like it's a different beast, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of film composers layer sample libraries, especially on
Yeah,
things like in the basses and the cellos to make it sound really full. Because if you're in a movie theater, you want that
you
low
want that
end
say right,
to fill
exactly.
it up, and you'd
Yeah,
never have a bass section that would sound as big as that. So
right.
that's one of the things that people have to realize, that there's a lot of times the orchestra will be augmented by a sample library, and it's not how an orchestra,
Actually
if you're writing
sounds
a
right.
piece to be played in a hall,
Mm-hmm.
it's the balances are not going to be like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you'll be very disappointed on one end and surprised on the other. So, couple of questions, sort of going back to guitar playing. Tony Landman asks, do you think the guitar shredders of today, so Tosin Abasi, etc., will bring back interest in guitar solos, perhaps eventually in more mainstream music?
I hope so. um some of the best, I say this a lot, some of the best players that have ever, played the guitar are young people playing on Instagram right now. I mean, there's
Right.
there's
Yeah.
really some incredibly great young players,
Mm-hmm.
and the only thing that's keeping them from becoming, and Tosin being one of them, is a dear friend of mine, um, is being able to write something probably with a singer that connects with people,
Mm-hmm.
because you can't break through that. You can't. It's difficult to break through on a with a large commercial appeal,
Yeah.
with music that doesn't have vocals and lyrics with kind of catchy choruses.
Yeah. 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 I have you had this this is related but unrelated. So on some of Herbie's records, back in the sort of 80s and then he kind of stopped making records for a while. He had so that gap, I think about 5 or 6 years before he made I think this is the drum. But on the recordings, and if you know any of those recordings, like some of those they're basically his sort of techno slash um, you know kind of poppy, but
Yeah,
not disco.
yeah,
He got went in and out of that. Um, he just they fade out when he just starts to play a solo.
right.
And I'm like, man, he starts to play the hippest stuff. And it's like fading out. I'm like, no, man, I want to hear like 20 minutes of Herbie shredding on this. That's what I really want. I mean, it's like the tune is cool and everything. And Herbie plays like really interesting comping stuff he throws in the background. But I I don't know if that was like, I mean, it's not really related, but it's
Well,
like,
when I interviewed Steve Lukather, he talked about that exact thing today, the stuff that people would play on the fades, and they'd save all their best licks for the fades. And so that people would turn up the record at the end and want to hear what they were playing.
right,
What is that?
as it was heading out, right? It's like
Yeah.
that's that man. I always like wanted to hear more. Like I wanted to know what the rest of the track was that they faded out. Like what
Yeah.
did they, what was Herbie playing? Um, So, folks, if you have any other comments or questions for Rick, I don't want to keep Rick too long. I'll try to wrap it up in the next 20 minutes or so. So please feel free to comment or ask questions. Rick, I want to change gears real quick because I know I mentioned this at the top of our discussion. Was for me, one of your first videos that I listened to and watched and found really interesting and talk about a story was your own personal story of your music school auditions. And um, I want to ask you a question, two things about that. One is, uh, what prompted you to make that video? Like, especially fairly early on.
Yeah.
Because if you made that video now, it might be more understandable because it would be, you sharing something personal about your life because it is a personal story. I think you
Yeah.
even mentioned in that video that there were people in your own family that didn't
Yeah.
know.
That never had heard this.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was actually really, that was great, first of all, because and I'll let you tell the Cliff Notes version of that story for the folks at home, but um, that it really resonates, I think, with a lot of people because a lot of people have similar kinds of experiences. So I'm just curious on your take on that and what prompted that.
Well, it's a story that I wanted to tell at that point in my channel, because I felt like it's something that a lot of people go through, and they may have some, shame associated with it, or embarrassment of things like that, and that these are things that you can overcome, and not to get discouraged by failures.
Yeah.
That you can really grow from these things.
Mm-hmm.
And the story was that I auditioned at two different colleges, Fredonia State and Ithaca College, to get in music school for guitar. And for both, you had to play classical guitar, and I didn't have any background in it. I had a guitar teacher that didn't have any background in it, and I
Mm-hmm.
learned a couple Mel Bay things, right? And then
Right. I
I
know.
learned a Scarlatti piece off a Julian Bream record,
Yeah.
and and I got rejected from both schools, and I didn't tell my parents. I lied to them, said I got accepted, because at Fredonia State, the track coach wrote me and said, "Well, you didn't get accepted, but you can come to Fredonia on a
On a
scholarship
scholarship
if
for
you run on the
track. Yeah.
track team."
Right.
And so I ended up going there, and then I re-auditioned at Ithaca the next semester, and I got in. And then 6 years later, I was a professor there. So it was,
Which is, yeah, it's a great story. It doesn't happen in all cases that somehow here you are, 6 years before, you're like,
same office,
see you later, kid.
same office, as that my name was on the door 6 years later.
Right.
So that's, um, who could have imagined that, really? What a,
Right. Right. What a turnaround.
yeah,
But that's also, I think a lot of that story was focused on the idea that not to give up. One thing,
yeah,
if you really believe in what it is that you're doing,
yeah.
that don't give up because you encounter some resistance along the way.
Actually, the title of the video was Fortunes of Hard Work. That's what it
That's
was.
what it was.
Yeah,
Yes.
Fortunes
Yes.
of
Now I
Hard Work,
remember. Yeah.
which is that's what it was about.
Well,
Like,
because you basically said, I think you took the rejection not as like kind of a Sumerian dismissal from music. You took it as, oh, I got some stuff to learn.
that's right.
If I want to do this, I better pay attention to the people that said you're not ready yet,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And you shed.
the thing is that had I auditioned as a bass player, which I ended up immediately switching my major when I got to Ithaca after I got in, the bass teacher, because I didn't want to stop playing bass. I played bass from that. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that's what my undergrad degree major is in. It's bass,
Bass,
right?
yeah.
So classical bass, and I went into head of the bass department, and he said, "Why didn't you just audition on bass?" And I said, "Because I didn't think of it. It never occurred to me." And he said, "You would have gotten in."
It's like, because we need bass players.
Right.
Right.
I mean,
Of
I
course.
played first chair in the orchestra in my high school,
Right.
and I easily could have gotten in as a bass major. So
Mm-hmm.
I changed my major to bass
Bass.
because I always wanted to play in orchestra. I had no interest in playing in jazz band, which is funny.
Yeah.
I never played in jazz band.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. That
So,
the uh the I wonder if you could speak well, so first of all, your experience, but also the value, and this might tie into that stuff we were talking about, producers and so forth, the value of study and the value of knowing a lot of music and keeping your ears open. Do you have like um, some thoughts to share with folks about this? I know you've talked about it in various ways in a lot of videos, but basically a lot of times, because if someone goes to your channel and just randomly starts playing videos, they're going to find you talking about everything that you love. And if they find everything that you love, they're going to find out that you love like modern classical music, you love film music, you love pop music, you love rock, you love country, you
I love
love
metal,
jazz, you love
love
metal.
jazz. Yeah.
I mean, there's very little um, in your musical imagination that you haven't touched. And it's not because you're touching it because you feel that you have to. It's because you love it. You enjoy it. It's like, oh, this is cool. This is cool. Um, what can you say to a musician who's learning and might turn their ears off by saying, "Oh, I don't like this," or "This is," or whatever? Like how? Because I sometimes experience a little pushback when I try to have some of my students open their ears to, say, jazz.
Mhm.
Right? Jazz is a tough. That's a that's a steep hill for some people.
Which
Right?
is really amazing to me always. I still don't know why people don't get jazz and don't want to even give it a chance.
Yeah, I don't know either, but my mind is wired for jazz, so I think I'm well
Too.
beyond the idea. But I mean, to get people to listen to say a solo, like Coltrane or Charlie Parker, or even just going something from the Duke Ellington Orchestra, um, I often wonder why it's so inaccessible for a lot of people who want to study music. I'm not just talking about someone who's not studying music, which might be understandable because there's a lot of information. You talk about this high information music in one of your sort of previous um, incarnations as a entrepreneur. But and I mention this. I actually use that term with some of my students. I talk about information. I think about music as information science, and I say,
Yeah.
well, there's we can parse this as basically being information, and in jazz there's a lot of information. The information is changing very quickly,
Yes.
and so that might be disorienting, and so you can understand the disorienting nature of that to someone who might be uninitiated. But to somebody who's studying music, um, how, like, do you have anything to say, like, I don't know, strategy is not really the right word, but maybe words of advice or encouragement to somebody who might be saying, you know what, this is a tough hill to climb, but I want to do it. What's the value of it beyond, say, what Professor McKinley might say? Of like, you got to know it.
Well, some of the things I did a tribute to Chick Corea
Yeah.
the last week,
And by the
and
way, rest in peace for Chick, man.
yes, and I thought, okay, I've done these tributes when people pass away, um, because I just want to just pay homage to them, and
Yeah.
and this one I thought I'm gonna play some music because that's the to me I thought to myself, this is the best way to honor people. I've
Yeah.
done a few of these, and I'm going to play music because there's people that are going to tune in that have never heard Chick Corea.
Mm-hmm.
Plenty of people.
Mm-hmm.
And this is my only chance to get them Chikria. So I was like, okay, what can I play? Well, I can't play anything on ECM. So then I thought
You play one of my favorite records, the
three
quartets.
quartets.
Yeah.
Yes. And so, and had the unique experience of seeing them on the
You,
first
on
gig
their
they ever did, and it was in Ithaca, 1981. I think it was 81. And I played the first
the
track.
first quartet. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
first quartet, and it's so powerful. And after I played the few minutes of it, and I stopped and I said, I don't understand. If you like rock, how can you not like this? Because this is the heaviest thing I ever heard. You
Yeah.
know, it's
Yeah.
like it's so heavy, it's so intense, and
It's
I
well
just
recorded too.
it's hard.
It's very well recorded.
Very well
About the production
recorded.
value. We want to talk about
Yeah,
production value, right?
yeah,
You know what's funny about that record? And then we can continue the thought, because you and I both had a moment of like, we both loved that record years ago. I can't remember how it came up, but when I first started getting into music and getting serious about music, my dad, I was downstairs in his study or whatever. My dad grabs that record off the shelf and gives it to me because I just got a record player, and he says, "You need to hear this," and he walked away. That was his one of that's the lesson of the day was, okay, all right, Dad. I put it on, man, and I was like, oh, whoa, the whole record from start to finish was just,
yeah,
blew me away.
yeah.
So my dad knew.
He knew.
He knew.
Yeah,
He knew it was good. So I'm glad you did that. And you do that for everybody. This is also a testament to your wide, like you did it when Eddie passed away.
yeah.
Um, I mean,
I did it when Neil
when
Peart
when
died.
Neil died, right? In other
Yep.
words, like, yeah. So, sorry, we kind of off tracked a bit,
No,
but
but when you talk about being open to other forms of music and how important that is, I mean, I was lucky enough to actually produce all these different genres of music.
right.
And when you're a producer, you have to really understand what
Mm-hmm.
makes the music, like how it's put together,
Mm-hmm.
and then you develop a real deep appreciation, especially for stuff that's done well, whether it's
Yeah.
pop or country or metal.
Right.
And
Right.
it's not easy to do these things well.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's I have massive respect for people that are great in all these
Yeah.
genres.
Yeah.
And you know, if you're a modern classical composer and you don't like jazz, well then you probably don't, I mean, you probably don't write that interesting of music, I don't think. You probably don't write music I would like. No
I
offense.
no, man, you know that you're speaking my language,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
I'm probably
I
not going
have
to like your music.
I have gotten some resistance from some fairly well-known people about jazz,
Yeah.
who are, composers, and I'm like, man, that's why you can't put two chords together.
Yeah.
I'm not naming names. I'm just saying I've heard pieces of modern classical music where it's like those two chords don't belong together.
Right.
And yeah, the
Well,
adage
jazz
of
players understand harmony better
yeah,
than anybody, I think.
right.
The great jazz players do. They really understand harmony, and they're so facile with it. They can use it and in so many different ways, and their abilities to think on their feet and
Hmm.
improvise are, you
Hmm.
know, that's the height of the musical mind.
That's actually and I don't want to, man, I first of all I really appreciate that you're taking this time, and I didn't want to keep you much past 9. So we could, you and I, obviously just the two of us could talk about music for, ever. Um, but you mentioned improvisation, and for me, every musician, doesn't matter what instrument you play, doesn't matter whether you sing, doesn't matter whether you want to be a producer, and I'll put that in air quotes for my students, or a composer, or whatever it is you want to do. Improvisation, the art of improvisation, and I'm talking about stylized improvisation even, but just the art of speaking from your own, self
Yep.
through music. Um, I've seen a lot of that erode in music education. And I was very fortunate, of course, to grow up in a house with a great improviser, I
right?
heard it every day, man. You know,
Yeah.
he'd play Bach and then suddenly Bach would turn into something else and it would be 10 minutes later, you know. And that was my model. So, um, could you speak to the like for a musician who's learning the value of improvisation and learning improvisation and becoming getting beyond your instrument from yeah, learning the notes, absolutely. But there are also other ways to express yourself and that makes you a more complete musician. Is that
Well,
something?
it's you're creating melody, harmony, in real time. You're composing in real time,
Hmm.
and um, you should be constantly challenging yourself to play new things
Hmm.
that you're hearing. So you're learning how to hear lines ahead of time and then execute them on your instrument.
Right.
You are learning how to reharmonize things in real time and go to places. Sometimes you'll get into jams where you're not sure
Mm.
how to get out of, and then you have to figure your way
You
out
have
of
to
it.
figure a way out of it, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
it's like
Right.
every improvisation is like a puzzle,
Yeah.
and you have to kind of complete that, and then you need to keep in mind phrasing and how to play phrases together,
Hmm.
how to develop motifs. I mean,
Hmm.
there's so many things about improvising, but it's composing, but in real time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, you and I both know one of the greatest improvisers of all time. That's I,
yeah,
who just can do it. I mean,
he
just
can do it. He's
he.
yeah.
I mean, with he speaks music as he breathes. Um, so we have more question, and then maybe we'll find a way to kind of wrap things up a bit. Some people have said they're enjoying our talk, enjoying our eclectic talk about everything music. Um, Michael asks, in regards to what makes this song great, how do you acquire the session tracks, the stems? And I sort of know a little bit of this a little bit of this story, but um, I mean,
Yeah,
do you?
so I used to I got a lot of them, thousands of tracks from somebody back in the early 2000s.
Hmm.
Um and now though the thing is so big that a lot of times I just get them from the artists.
Yeah,
They just send
they
they'll
just
just
send you
send me the
those
tracks.
stems. Right,
Yeah.
right, right.
So that's the series people love to have their songs broken down.
Right,
And
right.
so I have episode 100 coming up that I'm going to be filming next week. And I'm going to have the artist in it. Um, so, and he was very psyched that I asked him. So, this ought to be really, really
Really
fun.
fun. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so I in the future, um, I want to cover more genres of music and more periods of music,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe
Mm-hmm.
talk about how classical pieces are put together as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, so I will branch out, but most of the things I get either that I have already or I get them from the artists themselves.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's really interesting because I know well, we talked about this off camera earlier, but everybody knows this. Your kind of struggles or battles, if you will, with content right managers
Yeah.
and the YouTube or YouTube copyright thing and the strikes and etc. And how some bands are like you just said, they're so happy that I mean, that you're taking their song apart and saying, "Hey, like, have you ever heard this little riff here?" and isolating things and talking about it. Um, you know, because if you're a band, I don't care whether you're a well-known band or not, to have someone with your ears being able, like, picking a song that you think is really great and taking it apart has got to be really terrific. It's a learning experience also for their fan base.
Yeah.
You know?
Some people have asked me, some of the musicians that have played on records, like I broke down Kid Charlemagne. That was one of my first, I think it was my third episode by
Mm-hmm.
Steely Dan.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody said, I can't believe that Donald Fagen let you have that up there. And I mean, I never heard anything from Donald Fagen, but I mean, I transcribed the drum groove, the bass part, the keyboard part. I
Hmm.
played Larry Carlton's solo in it. I mean, I did a, you know, if you're going to show respect to the track, it's
You're gonna
like,
do it, right? Yeah.
right. I mean, I put it on the screen. Here's the drum groove. The, you know, Bernard Purdy, this is what he played. I had notated the drums. I know, you
Yeah.
know, and
Yeah.
I mean, that's respect there for the craft of how these parts are
Yeah.
put together
Yeah.
and things.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Um, Two more questions, and then
yeah.
we'll say goodnight for now. Uh, f- One question's related to the song. This is what makes the song great video, and the other one is a bit of a of an off topic question, but music based question from one of our audience members. But my question to you about this: what have you learned in the process of making all these videos? I mean, is there anything that surprised you, and that you've learned as a musician from doing this process of doing this sort of deep listening to the songs, breaking these things apart, doing the transcriptions, this sort of thing?
I am amazed at just the way these songs work together, how the parts work together. Everything is you not. It's
Mm,
not just the arrangement; it's just
yeah,
the sound choices,
yeah,
and they just you know them so well. And when you take one thing out,
mm,
you're like, "Whoa, what is that?" Then, or you just put a couple things in together, and then you play the melody, and you think, "Well, that sounds great like
wow,
that."
yeah, yeah,
You know, if you
yeah,
take out the drums and it sound, you know, still
yeah,
sounds amazing.
yeah,
You know, and that's the thing is you learn a lot as an arranger for what kind of elements go together
right,
well, and
right.
that's probably what I've learned the most about that
Hmm.
is arranging
Um,
um arranging skills and things like that,
yeah,
recording techniques.
yeah. I think that's it's an old but very tried and true method of learning um, music and learning how to put things together. Because in the days of before recordings, one of the ways to learn, in fact, one of the how
Read
Bach learned
scores,
was copy.
copy
You
scores,
just
yeah,
copy it
copy
out.
scores.
So if
That's
you want
right.
to know how the oboe part works in Vivaldi, you copy out some Vivaldi
That's
pieces
right.
and you figure out how to write for oboe that way.
Yeah,
I mean, and this basically the process you're doing is essentially the
same
same
thing.
process, right? Breaking things down, kind of doing the transcription. I always tell
Yep.
my students that transcribing,
There's nothing better
there's
you can
no
do.
minute wasted in
No,
transcribing. It is
no.
like literally, if you want to learn something really well, like you don't need me to teach you something. Just go transcribe it. Go
That's right.
transcribe a bunch of music, and you'll learn everything you need to know.
That's right.
Now, the one more question is from
Yeah.
my one of my students, Tom Schmidt, who's actually a jazz pianist. I took Tom to meet Chick Corea actually a few years ago when Chick was in town. Tom asks, Rick, what is your favorite Coltrane tune? Tough
My
one.
favorite Coltrane tune. Um, well, um,
Not to put you on the spot, but
Coltrane tune or recording.
that's
Like
actually a good
because
question, right? Yeah.
um, I tell you one of my favorite Coltrane records that a lot of people don't know is John Coltrane, Johnny Hartman.
You're
It
speaking my language,
oh my
man.
God, that record
I mean, I
that's one of
found
the
that
finest records ever recorded.
I play that thing a lot. Like
Yeah.
I just put it on. I'm like, I
I
just
used
want
to
to
give
hear
it
it.
to people, the CD as gifts to people, and because it's such a, it's one of the most beautiful records. It's one of the greatest recorded records,
Yeah.
and Coltrane's playing on it is phenomenal. And I don't know if people know it is what people used to know it back when I was in, 30 years ago. People knew that record, but I don't know if people
Hmm.
ever talk about it. I need to make a video on that
That would be
album.
awesome. That would
Yeah,
be a great. I would love to if you did that because that's one of
yeah,
my favorite records. And Frank Sinatra adored Johnny Hartman.
yeah,
It's obvious because
yeah,
Frank Sinatra's like this guy's got the goods.
yeah,
Like this, got something to teach me.
yeah. That
Um,
that is, I mean, man. But that record, everything about it, the recording quality, the tunes that they chose, the
Yeah.
versions, the melodicism of it,
Yeah.
Johnny's phrasing,
Oh
Coltrane's
yeah.
solos. Oh my God, it's unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an incredible record. Well, that's a great way to, I think, maybe cap off our evening. Tom says, excellent choice. Thank
There we
you.
go.
Good. So man, listen, this was really a pleasure. Folks at home, if you missed our live stream, and you didn't get a chance to ask a question or whatever, feel free to throw it in the chat. I can, if there's some question that's particularly compelling, I'll forward on to Rick. Of course, you can find Rick very easily. It's the on YouTube. If you just do a search for Rick Beato, it'll come up with everything music. He has two channels. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed to Rick's channel. Subscribe. And great show, guys. Yes, thanks, Tony. Thanks for watching. So Rick, thank you for taking some time out, man. It was real great to catch up with you. And when COVID isn't a thing anymore, um, try to happen my way back down to Atlanta. We can sit out by the
Great.
pool and talk music, some
Sounds
more
great.
music. So,
Pleasure, Elliot.
all right, cool. All right. Well, listen. So, folks at home, I'm going to switch over to my ending screen here. So that was really great. Thank you again for tuning on in. I'm going to do my little plug here to subscribe to the channel, please, if you haven't already subscribed. And so I hope wherever you happen to be, I hope you are doing well. I hope you are happy and healthy. Oh, I also want to point out that the next episode of Composers at Home Maybe Drinking Coffee is going to feature, and I'm going to switch over to the next week placard. And boom, that was pretty slow. Joseph Summer, who is a friend of mine. He's a Boston-based composer, very fine composer. So he'll be joining us on March 18th because of the way the calendar works out. Turns out that next month, March 18th, is also a Thursday. So anyway, folks, please stay safe. Let me get that subscribe button out of the way. Stay safe, practice responsible social distancing, and until next time, be well. Take care. Bye-bye.